Well, in Washington, you can count on a number of things. Democrats typically favoring alternative fuels, not tax breaks for the oil industry. Republicans typically go for free trade and not protectionism. But as Clean Skies Dan Goldstein explains, the politics of ethanol turns much of that upside down.
We ask that you create jobs in the heartland, better prices for our farmers, and more energy independence for our nation.
To North Dakota's Earl Pomeroy, ethanol is a lifeline for his state and his country. But supporting ethanol puts him in an unusual place for most Democrats, giving the oil industry a tax break. Pomeroy wants to keep a 45-cent per gallon tax credit to big oil refiners when they blend ethanol with gasoline. He's backing a bill to keep that credit going for another 5 years. Another government subsidy? Not to Republican co-sponsor John Shimkus.
We will then tick back up to have an increase in our reliance on imported crude oil if we don't have these alternative sources. And
backing the ethanol tax credit also puts some Republicans and some Democrats in the tough position of supporting tariffs.
We need to continue to extend the tariff in support of domestically produced ethanol.
We have a refinery that's closed in Danville, Illinois, because we haven't extended that.
That's a 54-cent per gallon tax on imported ethanol, such as that made from Brazilian sugarcane. The U.S. buys about 200 million gallons of ethanol a year from Brazil, just 3% of U.S. total demand. But the U.S. also taxes most imports. Backers of the tariff say that's so refiners can't use imported ethanol and still get the credit. Joel Velasco, who represents the Brazilian sugarcane trade group Unica, calls a tariff something else.
We've now had 30 years of trade distortions, protectionism, and subsidies to the domestic ethanol industry to build it. And clearly it has worked. A nascent industry that basically produced no gallons in the late 1970s today is the world's leader with 12 billion gallons. What we're saying is that maybe now it's time to, change that approach and have some competition.
And unlike other years, the ethanol tax credits have sparked a full-on political war this election cycle, with dueling campaign ads in Washington, on the ground, and in the air, over the credit and the tariffs.
You think your fuel comes from oil fields, desert sands, and faraway lands, but it also comes from a different kind of field, from my family's field.
Both sides accuse the other of misrepresenting facts. Brazil this month dropped its own tariffs on imported ethanol, hoping the U.S. would do the same. But Brazil already gets around U.S. tariffs by sending dehydrated ethanol to the Caribbean, where a tax loophole makes imports of ethanol tariff-free.
A company can bring hydrous ethanol, which is 5% water, to Jamaica, remove that water with Hugo Chavez's oil, by the way, because Jamaica doesn't have its own oil supplies, pay Jamaica 20, 30 cents a gallon, and then ship that ethanol duty-free to the U.S. Not sure that that's the wisest move for a number of reasons, but then we don't pay 54 cents. What we think is, listen, if Brazil can ship ethanol to the U.S. via Jamaica, why not just, instead of paying 30 cents to the Jamaicans to dehydrate, let's give it to the Floridians. Let the people of Florida dehydrate Brazilian ethanol.
While the talk may be about free trade and jobs, whether ethanol gets another tax break may depend on money. Another 5-year run for the credit could cost the government $5 to $7 billion a year, or as much as $30 billion over 5 years. Too high a price for some lawmakers, says analyst Christine Tezak of R.W. Baird.
I think that the $30 billion price tag certainly opens up either the discussion of narrowing the duration of the credit, bringing it down to 2 years instead of 5. I don't expect to see it be abandoned altogether, but I think that like other tax programs in this pay-go environment, they do run the risk of being temporarily expired.
Whether U.S. lawmakers decide to help the ethanol industry once again this year could come down to jobs, namely their own. Democrats and Republicans in Washington generally don't agree on much, but one thing they do agree on: getting reelected. In Washington, I'm Dan Goldstein, Clean Skies News.
Well, last week, Republican Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa and Kent Conrad, a Democrat from North Dakota, also introduced legislation in the Senate to preserve those ethanol tax credits and the related tariffs until 2015. The House Ways and Means Committee could act on some tax credits as early as Memorial Day.